Hello and welcome to Swimmed, education for coaches, athletes, and parents.
The only podcast dedicated to club swimming.
Here we examine swimming and sports from three perspectives: the coaches, the athletes, and the parents.
Through our candid and unscripted discussions, we share our views along with advice and applications that can help coaches improve their coaching, athletes increase their performances, and parents boost their support.
So welcome to Swimmed. Let's dive in. So today we're going to talk about first things first, which is, now this is something that's near and dear to my heart because I live in a community with a military base.
Yeah.
Right. And Augusta is also a military base. So you're used to that kind of interjection of swimmers. I've also had injections of different people moving from like the Chicago area and the Midwest, and where they're really good swimmers coming in. So it's not necessarily just beginning swimmers. But the question is, how do you get a swimmer to feel comfortable on your team?
Yeah.
Right? What are the kind of the welcome wagon things that you have to do in order to make sure that they feel comfortable? Because again, it's friends, fun, and learning are the three characteristics that really get swimmers into the sport. How do you maintain that? Because they've got to feel comfortable and they've got to make connections. It's interesting. My son just went back to swimming. And so basically, bike riding out in the summer in August in South Georgia is a little bit hot and sweaty. So he's like, I'd rather swim indoors and be in the cool water and all this kind of stuff. But instantly he found Ellie was a friend and they could talk about Pokemon, and his favorite set is a social kick so that he can just talk because he's a talker.
Yeah.
That's what he likes. But he's enjoying it. Why? Because he found friends. The head coach, Marin, he knows pretty well. And so he feels very comfortable. But he knows all the swimmers just because of my connection to the team in the past.
Yeah.
So there's that comfort level. But how do you do that with kids that are brand new?
Yeah.
And what are some of the tricks of the trade that you've used to make sure that people feel welcome?
Yeah. I obviously just started my season, which most clubs have at this point, and that is always a very big sticking point from not only just welcoming people, but leadership.
Right.
Because I think it starts with your leaders on the team. So it's not necessarily coaches. I mean, yes, we play a part in it of making sure that they feel comfortable, but as you said, a lot of it is their peers, right? So you have to make sure that you have something set in place with your athletes that have been there for a while to make sure that they are always keeping an eye out for those new kids. Because the difference between swimming and like football or a team sport is that we are always getting new kids in throughout the season. It's not like it's just this influx like it is with football, or soccer or something like that, where it's a team sport and you've got that tryout time period. If you don't get the tryout time period, you got to wait till the next season. With us, we've got kids coming in all the time. So, to me, it starts there with the leaders of the team that I always say to them prior to the beginning of the season that, hey, within their group, I'll say, we know that there's 3 or 4 more, kids coming in. Here's some background on them. I want you to take this one, you to take that one, you to take that one, you to take that one. And I assign them to the kids and say, get to know them. Ask them where they're going to school, what grade they are, where they came from. I want to know all of this, and I'm going to ask you at the end of practice.
Right.
And they know that I will. But it's something that simple of just starting from the beginning of having one person engage with them makes a huge difference. It doesn't mean every single person in that group needs to be trying, because sometimes that can be overwhelming, that it's like, oh no, somebody told them that I was coming and now I have to, now all these people are coming at me. So I always think 1 or 2 people, you just give them the heads up that somebody new is coming. Even with little kids, you'd be really surprised how many times I've done it with little kids that I've said, hey, there's a new swimmer coming. This is their name. I'm going to introduce you. I want you to be in a lane together today, and just, kick with them whenever you can, help explain sets when you need to, introduce yourself. So I always think you use one or two kids that you know, just like your son and my daughter, that really like to talk a lot.
Yes.
Always pick the very social kids.
Right.
Don't pick the ones that already are like, don't like talking a lot. You need the ones who could talk to a brick wall and be fine with it.
Right.
And, so I always, that's my beginning stage of it. And then each age group is very different because if you've got, a 6 or 7 year old coming in, it's a little bit easier for them to blend in. Most of those kids are young and new and
Right.
formidable. But if you've got a kid that's coming in that's 15, 16, 17, 18 years old that's new, that's a whole different ballgame.
Right.
Because most of the time, the culture in that group and that those friend groups that are in there are set. And a lot of times those kids have been together. I have a current group right now that they've literally been swimming together since they were 5 years old.
Right.
So that is very, very hard to take a new kid and break them into that. But as long as you make sure that you are constantly lecturing culture to your
Right.
kids and how important it is, I say to my senior kids all the time that I'm like, if you ever had to move or you ever had to go to another team, how would you want to feel the first day you walked on the pool deck?
Right.
And after that first day, how would you want to feel? Keep that in your mind with who these kids are. Um, you know, so number one, it's culture. That's a culture you have to create,
Right.
a welcoming culture. That's the biggest thing to me because I've seen a lot of teams that they don't care about that end of it. That it's
Right.
like, you're here to be on the team. This isn't social hour, which it's not on a club team. Let's just be honest.
Well, it
Like
depends. It depends
younger
what
kids,
age
it
group it
is.
is.
Younger, yeah, younger kids, it is. But the older they get, it's not, there's a separation of groups for that. But you have to start from the culture standpoint of it, of teaching your swimmers that this is very important because you never know who's going to walk through your door tomorrow.
Right.
And if you're not welcoming, you could potentially lose a really good new friend, a really good swimmer, all because you just didn't make the time to welcome them.
Right.
So that's just a lecture that I start with at the beginning of the season from the get-go, but I make sure that, I assign them to someone individually. So what about you? What did you do with your swimmers
Well,
to
I'll start with the culture question. I talk to my swimmers a lot about the difference between being a teammate and being a friend.
yeah,
So like your group that have been together since they were 5 years old, they're probably friends. They've crossed over, they share birthdays, you're invited to the birthday party, you go out, the families know each other, the parents are probably hanging out during the swim meet. So there's a friendship side of it. And so
right.
what I always try to talk to them is when we're on deck, it's about teammates and how we
Yes.
make each other better. So you can catch up with your friend because maybe you're at different schools. And so this is the only time you guys get to talk. We'll talk, get
Right.
to know each other and all this kind of stuff. But you're probably going to call each other or text each other on the phone too. You can catch up during that. While we're on deck, let's make sure we're cognizant of all of the teammates that are on the deck and make
Right.
sure that we're including everybody in the conversation.
Mhm.
So have a couple minutes, get caught up, get to know each other, like what's happened throughout their day, and then open up to everybody else. And usually what I like to do is a transition time. And so I learned this whenever I helped coach a women's college soccer team.
Yeah.
They needed an assistant coach. I have a little bit of a background, obviously in coaching, but also in soccer. And so I was just the assistant. I was just go get the balls, put them away, all this kind of stuff. And the head coach talked about how he would always just let them warm up themselves and stretch and give them like 15 or 20 minutes of just not him
Yeah.
and just let all the women just talk and get to know each other and see how their day was going and transition from school time to practice time. And I
Right.
think that even on a men's team, you should do that. Allow that transition time. And during that
Yeah.
transition time, you talk to the swimmers about, hey, you guys can talk and mull around, but whenever I say it's time to stretch or it's time to get ready, now we're all in when we're in stretching circles, everybody's talking to each other. And so
Yep.
so they have a time of friendship, then they have a time of being a teammate, and that's their transition into what's going to happen in the pool, which is where they're going to encourage each other. I
Right.
think that's really important. I have a quick story. So one time I was coaching a group, it was the gold group, and we had made a lot of changes, very rudimentary. Like at this time, we start practicing our stretching. Students, swimmers will lead the stretching. At this time, we will get in the water. Everybody talks to each other like, "Hey, that was 1 of 10. This is 2 of 10. We leave on the 35, just to get everybody acclimated." So we worked for like 3 to 4, maybe 5 months on that and got it down pat. And then a new crop, we had move ups. So these
Yeah.
kids were coming in. I said, you guys have got to train the new people on how to do this. Now, I didn't give them enough instruction on how to do that kindly. And it became like dictatorial. Like, you are now part of our group and you've got to do it this way. And like the kids were like, what's going on? So we had to like transition that and say, okay, let's not be hard on them. Let's
Right.
be welcoming to them. Let's show them how we do this instead of you're not doing it right. And maybe that was a little bit of a reflection of my coaching at the time. So, anyways, we had to dial it back. So I think that's how you get that welcoming culture, is allowing them to understand, because whenever they move to a new school, whether that's elementary to middle school to high school to college, when they do this track of education that we have, when you get into the bigger school, you're gonna be introduced to a lot of new people, and you've got to be able to have the skill to say, these are my acquaintances and these are my friends.
Correct.
And so what I normally say to like swimmers, if they're going to college, the people that live on your dorm floor are all acquaintances. Yes, you
Right.
have something in common with them, so you feel a bond to them. So
Yep.
like whenever I went to school, I was on Traber 3. Traber is the dormitory. I was on the third floor.
Yep.
So I have a affinity with all those guys that were on that floor. But at the same time, they're just acquaintances, because
Right.
some of them I didn't get along with,
Yeah.
and some of them you just had different packs of what their interests were. So that gave you a platform to get to know people. But then what you do is you say, okay, who are my friends going to be? And
Hmm.
what your friends should do is reflect your values.
Yep.
And so as soon as you have somebody who skips class, and I don't skip class, they stay in the acquaintance. They don't become friends. I don't hang out with them, because they're
Right.
going to pull you down. And
Yep.
as soon as like somebody, and depending on the institution and what they allow, smoking, drinking, skipping classes, any kind of negative, not being one thing I think is really important is exercise. If they exercise and you obviously exercise as a swimmer, they're probably the people you want to hang out with, because that's going to help
Yeah.
you out. So
Yeah.
you've got to differentiate that. If we can start doing that at the pool deck and say these are teammates and these are friends,
Right.
because we have more overlapping here. If we can separate those, then you have a better chance of doing that in your life.
Hmm. Definitely. And, you know, right now I have a swimmer that just left yesterday for college, and and he's going to swim in college. And I was just going back in my mind as you were saying that story of what my reality was swimming in college. And I had a very close knit group of friends in my club team that were like family. I mean, I had grown up with them,
Right.
and my coach was like my second mom. And so when I went to college to swim, it we were put on floors based upon our sports. But the way that they did the dorms was that one floor would be students and the next floor would be athletes, and then students, then athletes, and
Right. To
students.
kind of like keep the shenanigans down,
Right.
right?
And so all of my swimmers, we were all on the same floor together. And I remember after the first week, it's a super big shock, your first week of college swimming, because you're getting up way earlier most of the time than you ever have before. And
Well, you're a distance person,
I was,
so not
I
everybody
was,
has to do that all the time.
and walking across campus as a group
Hmm.
at 5 o'clock in the morning, when there's literally no one, not even the professors are there, to the pool, knowing that you're about to swim for 3 hours. And there was a bond established with
Right.
that work, with that level of mentality, that no one understood that. And I tell my club swimmers now that the bond that you are going to have, that you build here, is something that not a lot of people do understand, because swimming is it is a really tough sport. Not everybody can do it. You
Right.
are staring at a black line for 2 hours. You are working harder than most sports do in one practice. It would take them a week, and you're doing it in 2 hours, in one practice. So that bond is something that I think helps. I and I think that I always tell my kids that, like, the older you get, the more that you realize swimming becomes your family. And just like you
Right.
were using the comparison, your club is your family, your friends are your friends at school, because your friends will never understand why you can't go to a football game because you need to be at swim practice,
Right.
or why you smell like chlorine in the morning every time you show up at school. They're not going to get that. And it doesn't mean that they're not still part of your life. It just means there's a separation. So, but I also think from that perspective, why I was saying about the college swimming thing is that the great part about swimming is because it's so unique that when you are a new student, a new athlete coming into an atmosphere, you're almost given friends. You're given a
Right. Yeah. No,
group.
there's a sociability that's there.
Right, that understands you. As where I always think the difference, even watching my daughter go through it now, because I was track and cross country and swimming. I did play basketball for a little while, but I was more of an individual sport kind of person. And when you see with, teams that you've got to try out for that are, roster teams,
Right.
there's a difference because you have to try out for that. Swimming, yes, you still have to technically try out, but there's always a spot for you. Depending upon what your level is, you get placed in a group, but it's not the same dynamic. So when you come in from, a new city, a new town, you're guaranteed a group of people that already semi understand you. So
Right.
it
You're part of a culture that everybody has this similar vocabulary, similar ways of looking at things, understands, what it takes to be a swimmer.
right. So I mean, no matter what, I always feel like any any kid that I've gotten that have really moved from an extreme, that's their first form of comfort when they move there. The first thing that they do is look for a swim team,
Right.
because they're like, at least they can get this set of friends and comfort. So if school isn't working out yet, or they're not finding that peer group, they've at least got one to start with. That's like
Right.
an automatic environment and family. So, you know, I do think that that's just something that makes the sport of swimming great, because you do have an automatic kind of in. It's just a matter of making sure that your environment and culture that you've set up allows those new swimmers to come in and feel like they're a part of something. And it doesn't mean, so we'll start on this fact of it. It doesn't mean that they automatically are going to be accepted into the fastest group of swimmers.
Right. Of course.
Or, that are there, or, just like the example that I gave of the group of kids I have right now, a group of kids that have been swimming together since they were 5. I have had a lot of parents and swimmers that have struggled with that. And I'm sure you have too, that, why are they not inviting us to go get ice cream? Why is my swimmer, not this, not that? And I have to constantly work through with parents and kids of saying, that's going to take time. You can't
Yeah.
expect these kids to just immediately erase something that has happened. Just as you said, I love the example that, like, I will tell parents, they're in the lane with them, they're talking to them, during practice, they're being good
Right.
teammates during practice. The outside stuff, that's outside of our club. That's
Right.
not something that I can force on anyone. That's not something any coach can force on anyone.
But
You
you
know,
can give guidelines for that. Like, I think that's
correct.
where a coach can step in and pull the kids aside and say, okay, look, I know you guys like to go to ice cream after practice to get your dairy or whatever it is that you guys like lie about and think that it's nutritious.
Yeah,
Nonetheless, you guys like to do that. It's fine. But if 50% of the group is going to go, just invite everybody.
correct. Yes.
You know what I mean? Like, if it's just something that's going to be you and your friends, then don't mention it.
Right.
Don't talk about it at practice.
Yep.
Like, if it's talked about at practice, everybody needs to be included. So if you
Correct.
come up with this bright idea, then wait till practice is over, put
Yep.
them in your car, and then go and do it.
Yep.
But just giving them the understanding of how to make the invitation so that either everybody's invited and they can or cannot make it, or just the select group of friends are there. But there's
Yep.
ways that you can do it. You guys can text each other afterwards as you're going home. Hey, I'm going to go to ice cream. Does anybody want to join me? And it's
Right.
only like 3 friends.
Yep.
So be it. But I
Yeah.
think that as coaches, we can lean into that a little bit because I see myself as a pseudo parent to some
Mhm.
degree. Like I want to echo what the parents are saying, and I want to have that conversation with parents where you're telling me stuff that's happening at home that I can echo. But I think of myself more as like an uncle. You know what I mean? I don't want to be that in that role of I just want to be like, hey,
Coach Uncle Matt.
yeah, it totally is. Because I mean, like my nephews come up to me and they'll ask me weird questions and they'll ask me advice on different things. And I'm not the dad. I
Yeah.
don't want to be, I never take it from a perspective of I'm like, hey, this is what I would do if I were in your shoes. Now, maybe as a parent, I would have like with my kids, I would have a different take on that because I know them better.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? I know the ins and outs of my kids and the way that they think and the way that where I think they should kind of move themselves and what they like and what they don't like and all of those kind of things. I don't know that with my nephews. I mean, I
Yeah.
know some of that because we have conversations, but they can ask me honestly, well, like, what would you do in this situation? And I can give them a little bit of an inside out perspective because I know them at a certain level where I really do know who they are and their
Yeah.
talents, but I don't know them so well that I'm a parent. And
Right.
so I think that we can move in that space, and that's the coaching space that's there. The other thing is, I always kind of shy away from we're a family as a swim team because I think that for a lot of people, family is a really positive thing, but for a lot of people, family is a negative thing. It's
Yeah.
something they have to put up with. And so in any organization, that's going to be there. But then I also think that in some cases, it creates false bonds
Mhm.
that are there. So if you're my family, like I just said, I feel like more of an uncle if I'm going to use that metaphor, but I really just want to be a coach that
Yeah.
can breathe into their lives. And I think that with my team, when we first got together, it was a really close bond because it was a small group of parents and families that got together and we were really good. And then as the years go by, I hear, hey, we're not as close as we once were, or we're not a family anymore. Well, it's because you had a certain bond here, but as people get out of the sport, whether they graduate, whether they move on to other sports, as new people come in, it's going to change that dynamic. And
Mhm.
so that changing of dynamic is more important to me than we were once a family, now we're not. Well, what does that mean? Well, that means I probably want to get out.
Yeah.
And so it's a hard bond that's there that you have to look at.
Mhm.
But the other thing that I think here, I want your opinion on this. So I was listening to a book and they mentioned another book called, I think it's called Savage Marketing or something along those lines. But anyways, they were talking about different ways that we connect as a group.
Yeah.
Okay. So some of those can be our creation story. Then it can be, our philosophy or our goals. It can be icons that we associate with words and our lexicon that we have, shared values to some degree, the way that we look or the way that we act.
Yeah.
And you find that with any organization, there's like 7 of them that comes down. Those are the ones that I remember because as I was listening to it, what are some of those symbols, some of those things that bond your team together that an outsider needs to be part of in
Yeah.
order to feel like an insider? How do you bring them from an outsider to an insider using those kind of
Mhm.
parts of your team?
Well, I think let's start with little kids. With little kids, it's simple things like having them play games during practice where
Okay.
have they have to, enjoy each other. They're having to communicate where it's not just a coach telling them a workout, but it's things where either they have to work as a team to solve a puzzle or like they're
Right.
doing relays or something like that that creates that swimming bond atmosphere
Right.
to begin with, because I think the simplest form for little kids, we talk about this all the time, is getting them to play,
Right.
making swimming fun, so it's not just about swimming back and forth and technique and drills and all of those things. So I think from the simplest point of really, really small kids, it's having them play games together, making sure, if you see two or three kids that are constantly wanting to be in a lane together, constantly talking, you separate them, put
Right.
them with other kids so they're forced to get to know. And normally, most of the time, you watch that they start making other friends and joining in, and all of those
So
things.
are there specific games that are kind of like their favorite games that if somebody from the outside learned those games, they feel like they're on the inside?
Yeah, definitely. We do one where they stand at the block and toss their goggles and try and get them onto the flags.
Yes.
And yeah, so like that is something that little kids love. It's the
Right.
simplest thing. But they love it. It's one of the most fun things. They love relays where you take the boards and you try to build a house with kickboards.
Right.
That's a lot of fun that kids love to do. Or they like doing the worm relays where like you take five swimmers and they have to hold on to each other's ankles or something and swim down.
Right.
But it's super simple things that you just make sure that you're taking groups and pulling them apart of friends and putting them with other kids. And then normally all of a sudden they're all bonding and having fun together.
Right.
I also think a big part of that too is that I have seen over the years when kids bring, and sometimes this drives age group coaches nuts. I know this, but like when kids bring Legos to
What?
me,
I've never heard of this. This is new.
Legos are like this immediate swarming, and not just of like one team, but like there was an 800 championship last year that we sent our kids to, and two of my boys are just Lego maniacs. They
Right.
love Legos, and the parents gave them Legos to play with while they were waiting for their events. And this particular pool has a really big outside deck around it because we're in the South, so a lot of our pools have garage doors and kids can sit outside. And they were sitting outside with these Legos, and one of my coaches sends me this picture, and no joke, there was probably 30 kids
Right.
that from all different teams, not just our team, all
Playing.
different teams sitting around putting Legos together.
Right.
And and they all got to know each other and became friends. And I text the parents that I was like, "Do you see what your sons have like created?" And they're like, "Oh my gosh." And that wasn't their purpose. But like, and they were worried that they were like missing events because they were like playing with the Legos. And then a bunch of the age group coaches were like, maybe we should bring Legos to the meet, and like we can always find the kids because they're sitting there playing Legos.
Yes,
So I don't know.
absolutely.
And so, it's again, that was a common theme that all of the kids like at that age love Legos. Or with the girls, it seems like bringing coloring books to meets, they all will bond over coloring.
Well, and
Um,
like when we were at Zones, we bought chalk because there was an outdoor patio, and we
yeah,
just started doing chalk, and then other teams would come over and draw on chalk because it'll disappear with the rain. But it was a bonding experience.
Yeah, so I mean, simple things like that, I think, is what helps kids connect to each other at a young
No pun
age.
intended there. Connect.
Yeah, connect. But, I would have never thought about Legos, and the parents didn't even think about Legos. And now it's literally a thing that the boys are always like before me, who's bringing the Legos?
That's awesome.
Who's like, so, something as small as that you can do that, as a group of whatever age they are, they bond over that. A big thing with me, with the middle group, because that's such a hard group, that middle age of 11 to 14-year-olds. Oof.
Yeah.
Like they're changing so much. They're unsure of who they are. So especially bringing new kids in that are that age, they struggle a lot. They struggle a lot just trying to bond, trying to, find some medium ground. So it sounds really ridiculous, but I have found with that age group, when you start introducing dry land to them,
Yes. That
it
bond.
bonds them.
Yes.
And so I do find it really important that 11 to 14-year-old group, when you start doing dry land together, just like you gave the example of the soccer team, I think at that age, if you do dynamic warm up with them and allow them to talk during dynamic warm up, or part of their dry land is, simple little games that actually tie into dry land,
Right.
it helps them create that bond
Yeah, I
outside
know
the
when I was
warm.
at AB, when I was at a club team, we basically would just, for a dry land, it was 30 minutes. And it was a little bit of warm up, a little bit dynamic stretching, and then ultimate frisbee.
Yeah.
And as
Right.
long as everybody's running, you just keep it going.
Mhm.
And it allows everybody to participate or not participate, however they're feeling that day. But it's dry land, but it's not so serious that we're exercising so hard that they can't bond. It
Right.
brought that group together better. And
Right.
if you can do some kind of games that is helpful, but not
Yep.
just, very, very hard where they can't communicate, it's really helpful. I know that
Well,
like my son would show up just for drylands. He was like 7 years old. And he'd be like,
yeah.
"Can I do drylands?" And he was trying to beat all the seniors.
Yeah.
And the seniors are just trying to take care of him and play around
Coach's
with him and
kid.
all that. But it
The same
broke up,
way.
and we weren't just playing games, but I mean, it broke up what was going on,
Yeah.
and they could focus on something different. And he wasn't there all the time, but it bonded him with them, and it allowed them to have a different dynamic where it wasn't so serious and about themselves.
Definitely. And I even go as far as like, there may be certain days where like I, tell the coaches or I do it myself that I'm like, okay, guys, be prepared. We're doing super hard dry land today. And then I show up and I've got popsicles and they all just sit around and eat popsicles and talk. Um,
Yeah,
so it's it's just putting them in a social situation where they are talking, they're excited, they're having fun at that age from 11 to 14,
right.
because again, I can tell you with like the popsicle thing, it's absolutely ridiculous because they're like the cheap push-up pops, right? That you
Yeah,
can get for like $12 at the store. But when you tell them all, it's an automatic bond of like, oh my gosh, we don't have to do anything.
yeah,
Right.
exactly.
That like they're just so excited. It's not at any like cost really to you. It's
Right.
cheap, but it's something that helps them, you know, relax after a hard day of practices or whatever. Um, or even sometimes that I see the first week is always really hard. Either the first week of school when they actually come back, or like the first week after Christmas break,
Right.
right? Like that 11 to 14-year-old range, they become zombies. Because
They're
they
exhausted. Yeah.
just, right, they're dealing again with school and having to get back in the mode of things and friends there and all of that. So I think it's so important to be aware of reading the age groups that you have of where they're at mentally, but too, in that same situation, say that you're doing dry land for those 11 to 14-year-olds. I always make sure if there's a new swimmer that's in the group that I pair them with, number one, the one who I know is the not necessarily the best at dry land, but the best at following instructions in dry land. Uh,
I think
I'm
it's
not
one
gonna
and
say
the
the best.
same if you're
I'm
following
gonna say the
instructions.
listener and the one who like, knows what's going on and does it the right way. I
Right.
will always pair them with that person for like the first week of it, just to be like, make sure you're guiding, make sure you're helping, stay alongside of them, until they're comfortable with it. So, again, it kind of goes back to that pairing of, an individual to an individual to help them get along with it.
Right.
So let's go to senior group. What did you do with senior group, trying to create that bond, and did you do games? Did you do stuff like that?
Well, senior group's always difficult because everybody's in the work mode and they need to be in the work mode. And then if you
Right.
bring in somebody who is coming from another culture, that team culture that doesn't work as hard as you do, that makes it really difficult. My senior group was it was hard workouts. It was really difficult workouts. And so the one thing that I always tried to do was ease new swimmers in. So, hey, yeah, it's a 2.5 hour practice. I only want you to come for like the first hour
Yeah.
and get the warm up and kind of get used to that. And then you can jet off because you have other things going on. Now, a lot of the times they want to stay because they want to get to know others and they're kind of, yeah, I have brothers and sisters. I'm tired of them. I want to get ingrained in the community. I want to find friends. And so they're going to want to stay longer so they can stay, but then they can help me coach or they can kind of be there as long as the senior group knows they're transitioning in and we're going to give them an hour, then an hour and a half, then 2 hours. So by the end of the first or second week, they're at full time. Just allows them in case a lot of the times when they're moving, hey, I can come in for an hour, but I really need to go and get my room set up, or my mom needs me to go do something, or my dad needs me to go do something. So it gives them like, hey, we're not going to take 2 hours out of your day. We'll just ease you. And it's
Yeah.
going to be the most social times. So it's going to be the dry land time. It's going to be the
Right.
time where they get to interact. It's going to be setting them up. The second thing is I really want to know the swimmer. So you talk about Lego before. I want to know what they're into.
Yeah.
Okay. So what do you do? What did your friends do? What are some of the hobbies that you have? What are some things you like to do outside of swimming? Now, as a senior swimmer, they've pretty much it's school and swimming.
Right.
And then their friends were part of the team. So they're looking for that same kind of interaction. But other things they're interested, what movies, what books do you read? What movies do you go with? What are these other things? And
Hmm.
so whenever I find that out, then I can connect them with the individuals that have similar hobbies or similar
Yep.
interests or similar book books and movies that they like so that they can bond over because what we find in like the literature is if we have two people that are really opposing each other, they really don't like each other, and you can find one common thread. They're from the same hometown, or they had the same high school, or they had the same whatever it is. Suddenly they become bonded at that one level and they ease up on all the other stuff that it keeps them opposed to each other. This is how like peace negotiation works. You got to find the common ground and then you move on. Well, friendships bond that way. We
Yep.
find something that we're interested in, and then we get to talk about that, and then we go into other areas of our lives. And so we want to have that occur with the senior group. The other thing, going back to the symbols that we have with military in particular, I asked some military parents, like, you guys are moving every 2 years if they're officers. If not, it's every 4 to 5 years. So what is that like for you? And how can I bring you in and make you feel more at home? And they just said the one thing that they have, especially with swim teams, is that when they show up, they don't have the gear that everybody else has.
Right.
And one thing that I had in my team is everybody wore our team caps during practice. We didn't wear whatever goofy caps you wanted.
Hmm.
Like we wore our caps. And so when they first show up, I hand them a cap, a
Right.
silicone cap, and say, here's your cap. And then they had other parents had given the suggestion, give them a team shirt too.
Yep.
And then we would have swag or merch depending on which era you're coming from. But anyways, you would have that available to parents and say, you guys can purchase this. Here's what we have. So when they go to their first swim meet, they look and dress like everybody else instead
Mhm.
of, hey, this year there's the t-shirt. Oh, you missed it. Well, you can wait till next year till we order new t-shirts. Order extras of
Right.
certain sizes and don't give them out so that when somebody comes in, hey, here's a shirt,
Yep.
here's the cap,
Yeah.
here are the parents, you can buy these things because those are the symbols that connect us, right? The logo of our team, the team colors that we have, because they're coming in, and then also like what they need to have in their net bag. Make sure you communicate that ahead of time so when they show up, they have everything that everybody else has.
Right.
Or
Hmm.
the other way you could look at it is bring nothing and then make them share. So they can bond over the share. And I never really thought about that because I want them to feel comfortable coming in. But
Yeah.
that's how that works.
Hmm.
And to give you a negative example of that, I had a swimmer come in and they were wearing a cap, and I told them to turn it inside out, and they thought I was joking. But it
Hmm.
really ticked off all the other swimmers, like, "Hey,
Yep.
these are our
Been there.
caps," and I'm like, "Here's a cap," and they're like, "No, I'll just wear mine." I was like, "Okay, you can do that today," because I want them to feel comfortable. But they kind of pissed off everybody else
Yep.
because it was
Yep.
like, "Hey, you don't want to be a part of us."
Yeah.
So you've got to think about how your team operates and what those symbols and the way that you use the language. And then the final thing is, I think language and lexicon is really important
Hmm.
because there's a certain way that we talk about our sets. There's certain
Yeah.
abbreviations that we have. And
Yeah.
so what I like to do is translation. Now, I have some swimmers that can never catch on to what's going on. And so I'm like, can you put that in? And I use their name. So let's say it's Jake. I'm like, can you put that in Jickeys and
Yeah.
Jickeys or whatever it is? Because it's like, can you translate to him so that he can understand it? Because I've explained it 3 times and just remind them.
Yeah.
So we would have a translator. So whoever's in your lane, this is a new swimmer. You need to translate what this means.
Yeah.
So when we do something that's like we would do like IM basics, which is a certain set of 1625 or 2025s that we do, they would just make sure that, hey, now we're going to do this. Now we're
Right.
going to have this, and just have them work with them, have the established swimmer work with a new swimmer to
Hmm.
make sure that they're following along so they can, so not only do they have the cap, they have the shirt, but now they have somebody who's translating. And if you get those 3 right, they're going to feel like they're part of the team.
Yeah, definitely. And it's funny because I'm gonna tell a story on my mom because this literally happened last week. And as I explained, she's one of my age group coaches.
Right.
And all of the coaches were talking after practice, and she made a comment that, Jen, can't you just make like some kind of manual that's like
Yes.
all of the terms that coaches use? And
Yes.
I started laughing and I'm like, okay, well, I will take 5 months out of my time because every coach has different
Right.
ways of saying things, and there is absolutely no way for me. And she's like, so there's not like in the military where there's just coding that everyone uses. And I was like, no.
There is within our team. And if our team is a branch of the military, then yes, then we have
Yeah, but
ways that
I
we can
mean,
communicate.
the rest of we were all just kind of giggling because we're like, yeah, well, I say this and I say this, and they're the same thing. But as they like, age up, there's different terms for them and things get transitioned differently. And you just got to make sure you're explaining to your kids what those things mean. And there's very basic, I mean, we do have a set of drills that we explain them the same way and they're using the same term.
Right.
But even when you write workouts, coaches all use different things that they edit words and how they say them. And my example was that I used to have a coach on my team that when they would say underwater dolphins, like it
Uh-huh.
was written on a workout, it would be a down arrow with
Yep.
H2O.
Yep.
And there was another coach who would literally write underwater dolphins. And so like, everybody is different. So like you said, when a new swimmer comes in, it's really important to make sure you're slowing up and explaining to that swimmer as you go through, or having another swimmer in that lane saying, oh, this means underwater dolphins. This means this means that, because it's very much a shock to them, and sometimes can really make them feel uncomfortable when they feel like they don't understand what's going on. When most of the time, the reality of it is, as a senior swimmer, when they're coming to a new team, they very much do know that drill, or they do know what that means, but their other coach said it in a different
Different way. Yeah.
way or wrote it in a different way, and all that they need is to be explained, no, this is what this means and this is what this means, and then they can go. And that might take 2 to 3 weeks, right? Because as you're progressing through sets and things, a lot of things change. So it's not a matter of, you should be expecting even a senior level swimmer within a week to know everything
Right.
that
Of course not.
you're writing down or you're singing. So you've just got to make sure there's somebody that they're paired with that's constantly saying, hey, after the set is explained, hey, do you understand what that meant?
Right.
And, or this is exactly what we're doing. Or like you said, throughout the set, reminding them, oh, okay, now we're doing this. I think that is a sense of security that new swimmers definitely need and coaches can work on. The other thing that I can say of the bonding aspect that I want to say towards swimmers and parents, because this is a part of my team, and I know even a lot of bigger teams that do travel trips,
Right.
that they rent buses and they'll all go to a meet, that is such an important culture bonding experience.
Yes.
And if your swimmer is not attending those things, and you're, well, we've got a family vacation that's been planned for a really long time and they can't be there, you don't understand on a senior level how much of a disconnect can happen
Right.
when that swimmer does not attend those things. And I say that because it's not even, I've had a lot of coaches that, will say to me, well, we can't do team travel trips. We're too small or we're too
Right.
big. And you and I both know that we have been a part of really big teams
Right.
that have thousands of swimmers on them that do team travel trips. We've been a part of very small teams that do team travel trips and everything in between.
Right.
And the reality of that is that that bonding that takes place of being removed from parents that they are having to survive and function on their own together is huge. It's monumental. And it can completely change, for better or for worse, the culture of your team. So I always highly recommend to coaches, parents, and swimmers, if you have the opportunity to take your kids on a team travel trip, and it doesn't even have to be that you're going out of state. It can be to an in-state meet that you do it. We do it, to one of our meets that is in state, that it's a prelims finals meet. And I will 100% admit this from a coach's perspective. I enjoy having control over the kids for a prelims finals meet as a team trip because guess what? They have to show up to warm-ups on time
Right. Yeah.
because we're all together. There is
Yeah.
not one parent not showing up. Guess what? You're down at the bus on time. And if you're not there, we're hunting you down
Right.
and you better be on that bus. It teaches them, accountability as a team. It teaches them to bond as a team. You have the opportunity to put them in rooms with people that they may not be used to being in rooms with because again, once they get to college, once they get to upper level meets like zones, you get put with roommates that you may or may not know, and you have to learn how to, function and communicate together. So I always think on a senior level, team trips are such a great opportunity for new swimmers to get to bond and get to really get to know the rest of the team because you're put in an environment where you don't get to choose
Right.
where your group that you're with, you're all together in it as a whole. So I highly encourage, swimmers and parents to please take into account if your clubs offer those opportunities to put a priority in it because it does really help them establish a bond with their fellow teammates that they don't normally get on a daily basis.
Right.
So I'm very pro that. I think it's a big deal to do something like that.
Yeah, I mean, I think for coaches, that's important. I think that also, like for the club team that I was with here in Valdosta, it was all of our meets were you had to travel at least an hour away.
Yeah.
So for a lot of the time, outside of the one being in Tallahassee, that you could go back and forth if you wanted to, we stay in hotels. And so there are times where the team would have team meals, whether
Yeah.
that be after a session, everybody would kind of meet at this one restaurant, or we would try to have a team meal where everybody would get to go food and show up at the team hotel. And then the parents and the swimmers could all bond. But if they wanted to go to bed, they could just go to bed. You weren't stuck at a restaurant till 10 o'clock at night waiting for the checks to show up,
Yeah.
which is really important. But we had some parents and swimmers that would always go. And so there was a bonding that occurred there, and then some that would never show up.
Yeah.
And you could tell that swimmer always wanted to be with the other swimmers and have that bonding, but the parents, for some whatever reason they had, were off always doing something else. They were always invited, but they were
Right.
always going off and doing something else. And so don't miss for those opportunities. Just if you're going to a meet and the team's going to a meet, try to find those times to bond so that you feel more comfortable as a swimmer and your parents feel more comfortable and you're not limiting your connection with the team because you're kind of there to do that.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And unless you have family in the area and that's a one-off, then
Mhm.
be a part of the team and make
And
sure.
I really like what you said about, the your family's getting like to go stuff and then meeting in the lobby because I think I'll even come at this as a parent with soccer that taking a bunch of kids and families to a restaurant when you are there to compete, which is priority number one,
Right.
and you're like, everybody needs to go to this restaurant and we're all going to meet there. We all know really anything over 10 people, you're asking for it. You're asking for a
Yeah,
two
it's gonna be
and a
big.
half hour meal that you can't get a check. Food isn't going to come out on time. Kids aren't getting fed. It's so much smarter to get to go meals and say everybody's got to meet back at the hotel. Um, or whatever, because in the end, obviously that bonding also has to coincide with us trying to make sure that the swimmers are rested and they're ready to go and they're not out late. So make sure when you're doing bonding things, whether you're the parent organizing it or you're the coach organizing, that it's not going to directly conflict with the culture you're trying to create of taking care of
Right.
their bodies and their minds and them getting rest. So I just think that that's a really important thing to do, that there's ways for you to maneuver around that than to take 20 kids to a restaurant and think you're going to get out of there in an hour. It
Right.
just, that's not going to happen. So, and there's certain meets that, you might have morning session and you don't have an afternoon session, so they can go to lunch and take 2 hours and it
Right.
doesn't
Yeah.
matter. But you shouldn't be doing it after finals when they have to be up at 6 a.m. and they got off the pool
Right.
deck at 8:30 p.m.
Right. We always went to meets down in St. Pete, so we could like there was always one session per day, and then you go to the beach.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
let's limit how much we're out in the sun and all that kind of stuff, but at least we could do that. The other thing that by meeting in the lobby is you take care of all the dietary issues.
Yes.
So everybody can get what they want to eat. Everybody can look out for what they need to look out for. The only problem is one time I wasn't there. I was down in St. Pete and I stayed with my in-laws, but I guess they got kicked out of the lobby because it was a Saturday night and there was a Georgia game going on, and we're all Georgia fans for the most part. So they were all cheering and they're like, "You guys have got to stop. Like you're going to wake up the
Yeah.
entire hotel between eating and cheering and all this other stuff." So you got to be a little bit careful at
Yeah.
times, you know what I mean? But so for swimmers, what advice do you give them specifically when they come to a new
So
team?
I definitely think the most important thing is be patient.
Hmm.
Understand that you are not automatically going to be somebody's best friend. That's something you just gotta feel out what what person is your person.
Right,
And but also to make sure that you ask questions. You've got to be able to communicate with people. And what I mean by that is, you know, you've got to, whatever swimmer you're paired up with, and if you're not paired up with a swimmer, after the first practice, if somebody isn't taking you under their wing, go to the coach and say, "Hey, is there somebody that can like mentor me or be alongside of
right,
me until I get used to this?" Because again, some coaches just get really busy and they forget and they don't
right,
think about it. So, ask for help, ask as many questions as you can.
right,
Um, but also be patient in knowing that, in any situation, it takes time for you to find your people within a team.
right.
So,
And it's rarely the first people that you kind of getting connected with. It,
yeah.
it might take several iterations.
Correct. So don't think that, the team dynamic doesn't work for you or the kids don't like you, because no matter which way you look at it, you're not only going to have to figure out who your people are, because no one can force that on you, but they also have to figure out who you are.
Right,
So just be open to, listening to conversations and asking questions, to other swimmers to figure out who that comfort zone is going to be for you. And I would say number two, that no matter what, you are not okay, let's say this. Senior group, you're not there to socialize. You're
right,
there to train. There is time for socializing and there is time for training, and they're two very separate things. And if you go into it expecting that socialization factor that happens a lot of times outside of the club, that you should always be included in that, you've got to change your mindset. Because especially, and I want to hit on this because it's something that I think I've watched for years now with senior swimmers, when they can drive, when they have that independence, it's
right,
very hard to make that distinction of the non-drivers that are still 14, 15 years old and maybe in senior group to the ones who have access to their cars and can go wherever they want,
Right.
whenever they want. So do not think that you don't fit in or you're not important when you've got swimmers that, older swimmers that really are on a very different level in their life than
Right.
you. There will be time that you will turn into those swimmers. But until that point, you can't have that expectation that you're going to immediately fit into that. And for younger swimmers, I say, every time you get an opportunity to play a game,
Play the
ask,
game.
play a game and try and get on a different team than you've been on before. If
Right.
you are grouped with a bunch of people that you constantly are put on a team with, ask to switch with somebody and go on a different team, because you never know who you can become friends with and who you're gonna, communicate with. So what about you for swimmers? What's your advice?
I think one of the tendencies that gets swimmers off on the wrong foot is bragging about themselves. Coming
Yes.
in with a kind of a chip on their shoulder. So what happens is we're competitors. So we want to be recognized for what we've done and how great we are. And we start talking about how great the team is that I came from. Well, that doesn't come across as, oh, they come from a great team, they're going to be a great part of our team. It comes across as, I came from a great team, we'll see if you're great.
Yeah.
Or I came from a great team, you guys should really respect me, and you should. And so there's this it comes across as braggadocious whenever it really should come across as, I'm trying to explain myself. So let your swimming do your talking for you.
Yes.
Right. And don't compare. Don't
Yep.
say, well, my coach did this, I don't know about your coach. Well,
Mhm.
that's now your coach, right?
Yes.
And so really make sure you come in and say, okay, I'm going to be open to new experiences. I'm going to be open to what's going on. I'm going to do my best. And I'm not saying sit down, keep your mouth shut. Talk about yourself. If they ask
Right.
you what your times are, give your times, because
Yeah.
they want to see what group you should be in and how you all stack up. But don't come across as, oh yeah, well, I was a state champion. Well, you were like a summer league state champion. You know what I
Right.
mean? And your time are slower than everybody else's. You need to find that balance of, I can talk about myself in a positive way, but not get across as I'm better than everybody else. And I've seen that a lot happen. And as a coach, I have to bring you over and say, hey, chill. They're not
Yeah.
taking it the way that you do.
Yeah.
Second thing is, know your audience a little bit. And yes, this is a very mature way of looking at things. Like you said, with little kids asked to be switched on teams, is that really going to happen? I don't know, because that's kind of a mature thing to do. But we had one kid come down from Chicago, and he's a great kid. And the swimmers asked him, "What do you think of Waffle House?" Which in Georgia is like a big thing.
Yeah.
And he's like, it's kind of crappy food. And they're like, what? And they lost their minds. And I was like, hey, just be like, it was, maybe he said it was okay. You know what I mean? Like, just say, I'm open to going with you guys. You know what I mean? Like, especially
Yeah.
if you get a reaction, that's like saying like Chick-fil-A is horrible.
I was gonna say that's like saying Chick-fil-A is not God's
Or if you
chicken.
go over to the West
Say that
Coast and
in
be like,
Georgia.
yeah, if you go over the West Coast and be like, yeah, In-N-Out. I mean, my mom makes better hamburgers than that. You're like,
Yeah.
okay, you just lost the entire group. Like
Right.
everybody's gone. Nobody wants to be around you.
Yeah.
So every region has their food, their restaurants, things that they do. When they ask you those kind of questions, they're seeing, have you gone? Just be like, I've never been to one.
Yeah.
And we had another swimmer that I'd never been to one, and then said it was, it's okay.
Yeah.
If they're excited about it, read the room a little bit. Look at your coach and be like, what should I say? Or like, I don't know, don't give an opinion and then talk to the coach. Like, they're asking me about Waffle House. What's the big deal about Waffle House? And let the coach explain it to you, because they're not going to judge you like the other swimmers are going to judge you.
Yeah.
So it's always difficult when you come into a new group. But again, I think patience, try to have experiences with the other swimmers that are going to bond, and just, when you get invited to something, go.
Yeah.
Whether it's the people you think you're going to be friends with or not, just go and
Right.
just experience it and get to know each other. For parents, because we want to talk to parents all the time, this is a scary thing.
Yeah.
Because swimming can really be a big deal, especially for senior swimmers, or your swimmer is just starting out. So maybe you're part of the community and you're trying swimming for the first time. Are they going to bond? Are they going to get bullied? Is it going to be something that's going to be safe for them? You need to explain those reservations and anticipations to the coach and
Yes.
see how the coach is going to handle it, because you might have different teams in an area that you can pick from. Talk to each of the coaches
Hmm.
and try to feel what's going to be the best for your swimmer, instead of just saying, I hope this works out, and
Yep.
then trying to control the situation from the backside.
Yeah, definitely. And I I will come in on that end of saying that every team has a different culture and it starts with the culture.
Right.
So I would recommend number one, going and ask to watch a practice.
Oh yeah,
Um,
that's a good idea.
Not put your kid in the pool when you go, but ask to sit in the stands and watch a practice.
Right.
The reason that I say that is because you can tell a whole lot about what the real culture is by just sitting there and observing.
Right.
And a lot of times, talking to a coach, you can get sold something that's not the reality of what's
Right.
going on. Whereas, and sometimes, a lot of the teams, it's a a community pool. So you don't even have to ask to go and watch.
Right.
Go look up their practice schedule and go sit in the stands and watch the practice without them knowing that you're even coming. Now, that doesn't mean you go down and talk to the coach the same
No,
time.
no, no. You're just observing.
Right. You're just observing. Go up, sit in the stands and watch it and see how those swimmers react. Listen to what the coaches are saying and see how your swimmer reacts watching it. And if they're like, those do not look like my people. That coach, I can't, how they're communicating with those swimmers, I don't like it. Then go look elsewhere. Because the reality of that is that same opinion that you're going to establish from sitting up in the stands watching that, if you think that it's going to change when your swimmer walks on that pool deck, 99% of the time it's not going to.
No.
What you're seeing is face value. It is what that team is doing and how they're training and all of that. So, you know, I think so many times parents miss that and they'll take opinions from parents that are already on the team, and sometimes you don't really know what incentive that parent that you're talking to has.
Right.
And so you might be told something, and then when your kid gets in that pool, you see something completely different and are going, well, how did this happen? This parent told me this is a great team, and this is not what
Right.
I was told. So, and I come from the perspective as a parent that not every team is going to fit your swimmer.
Right.
You might have a very intense swimmer that needs structure, that needs non-emotional contact, that just wants to put their head down and go.
Right.
And there are teams that are like that, and that's their group. Those are their people. There might be other swimmers that do need more caring and communication and a more centered culture. But your job as a parent is to know who your kid is, their personality wise, and to number one, observe before taking other people's opinions. And then number three, as you said, talk to the coaches. I have a lot of swimmers that are introverts, and the best thing that a parent could do for me is tell me up front.
Right.
My kiddo loves to read. My kiddo is an introvert. They don't like being social. We're trying to get them to come out of their shell a little bit more. That helps guide me as a coach to whom I'm putting them in a lane with and how far I'm actually pushing them to be social or
Right.
to do certain things. So very much be honest with the coach of, who their child is, who your child is, and what they're like. I can say with my own daughter how many times I've said to coaches, Evie will talk.
Right.
From the moment she has been born, she talks and she talks and she talks.
Right.
So whatever you do, don't put her with people that are going to allow her to chat, because
Right.
she's got to do it. She will work her little butt off as long as she's not paired with somebody that's going to tempt her. If she's tempted, she's got to talk. So, that helps from a parent's perspective if you have that conversation with, the coaches ahead of time. But to me, the biggest thing is observe the culture first from the outside. before you're listening to other parents, because their experience could be very different than a lot of other people's. And you need to know what your family values are and what your swimmer is like before you take opinions of other family members.
Yeah, I would even say if you're in a town where there's multiple teams, try out each team. Ask the coach, can I come in and do a practice or two? We're just trying out different teams to see where we want to land. Number one, that's really good because I think coaches respect that.
Yes.
You're not just coming in and saying, this is my team because of the facility or something that's outside of the coaching and the atmosphere. But then talk to your swimmer about which fits them better, which are they more excited about, and let them help make the decision.
Yeah.
I think and then they get to know all the other teams and all the other coaches so that when you go to a meet, it's, hey, I know you, I know you, I know you, and everybody's going to be a little bit more friendly. And so that helps your swimmer out, unless the coach is a big jerk, and then you know that you made the right decision.
Right.
The other thing is your swimmer is probably going to be influenced by more than just friends. They're going to be influenced by the facility or when practice times are, or the type of workout, or is it similar or conducive to what they were doing before? So make sure you're open to discussing that with your swimmer if it comes up from them, so that you're being supportive of your swimmer and also the team that you've selected. But I think that getting that feel, and then there are going to be parents that are going to come alongside. So I would say to parents that are already on a team, when you see somebody new, or if you're a coach and you've been assigned by the coach as an ambassador or a welcomer to the team, that you bond up and you talk to them and you walk them through the process of, this is how we do things on the team, and here's where you find your dues, and here's how invite them into the culture that you have,
Right.
and be a positive influence. And I think that if you have that, so now you have the swimmers have somebody in their lane that's helping them out. The parents have somebody to come alongside. And if your team doesn't have that, maybe ask and say, hey, can we do this to foster that? Because that's going to be a lot more welcoming, and that's going to help the parents feel better about the team and what they're being part of as well.
Yes, definitely. And, I will end on my biggest advice is that team culture, especially in the world that these kids live in now, is so important.
Yes.
You need to make sure that your swimmer feels safe, feels cared about, and feels like they can learn and improve.
Right.
And if at any point in time they do not, conversation needs to happen with the coach. And if it still is not there, do not keep your swimmer in that environment.
Right.
You need to move them. You need to allow them to speak for themselves, to say, this is not going to work. This is not the environment that I need to be in. I'm unhappy. I feel unsafe. I feel like I'm not growing. Listen to them, because throughout their career, throughout schooling, if they don't feel like they can be honest with you as a parent, that's not the atmosphere that they need to be in, then they'll stop coming to you when it really is important.
Right.
So listen, make sure that you're listening to what they have to say, because they're the ones that are in the pool. They're the ones that are being coached. In the end, you're just observing and paying the bills.
Yes.
So, it's gotta come from them for sure.
Right. And I as a former owner of a team, turnover happens. And my community was more because of the military, but you don't want to lose swimmers, but you want to bring swimmers in. So if you have a good onboarding way of bringing swimmers in, that's thoughtful, that really is for the best of the swimmer and really enhances your culture, I think you grow your team and everything's going to be fine. So thanks for the discussion. This is good.
Yeah. Yay.
All right. I'll see you next time. Whatever platform you're listening to, make sure you subscribe and hit the like button. And if you loved us, leave a review. Also, if you're interested in getting more information from this episode, click the link in the description and we'll send you notes from this episode. Finally, do you have a topic to suggest or want to share your thoughts? Email us at swimedinfo@gmail.com. swimedinfo@gmail.com.
Join us next time for a thoughtful discussion about swimming and how coaches, athletes, and parents can improve their performances. Thanks for listening to Swimmed, education for coaches, athletes, and parents.